Although I didn't initially have in my mind, like, oh, I am going to be an entrepreneur or business owner, I knew I wanted to pursue a career that invited me to take risks on a regular basis and create something out of nothing. And those two ideas are very much in line. So when the time came to leave Disney and I was given the opportunity to join with James and Ryan in this business together, it seemed like the right decision.
I think in today's culture, especially in our generation, there's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of people telling you need to do lots of different things all at once to be successful. And if I have to be relentlessly consistent and just try to block out the noise and stay focused on the things we're trying to accomplish at Fratzke Consulting, the things we're trying to accomplish in our family life, and kind of just block out the rest of the noise from there.
I have always been a huge fan of origin stories. Whether it's a superhero, a professional sports team, or an iconic business, we all love hearing about how something small ultimately became something huge. And while we won't be talking to any superheroes here at The Practical Optimist, today's guests do hail from Disney and the entertainment world. Lisa and James Fratzke started their branding, marketing, and internal communications firm back in 2017. They describe themselves as being gritty idealists who are committed to relentless consistency, and their origin story is something to definitely take note of. I'm your host, Ken Schmitt, founder and CEO of Turning Point Executive Search and author of the book, The Practical Optimist. Today's discussion will cover everything from the importance of brand management to what it takes to run a company as husband and wife, to how cheesy pickup lines actually do work sometimes. Lisa and James Fratzke are about to drop some serious branding knowledge on us all as they take us through the intersection of leadership and life. Lisa and James, thanks so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast to chat about your business and how you guys met and what it's like being a husband and wife entrepreneurial team out there. So welcome.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks for having us. We're really looking forward to it.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, I know that our listeners don't know exactly where you are, but you're here in Southern California. I'm in San Diego, and you're up in the Orange County area, which is good aside from all this crazy gray weather we're having this time of year. It's a good place to be for sure.
It is. When you look outside your window right now, it doesn't necessarily scream sunny and 72 degrees, but we're making do. It's like 65 degrees out. And for anyone listening that's not in Southern California, they'll hate me for this. We may have to put a sweater on today. It's
exactly
so cold outside.
I always talk about it's a socks day. I got to actually wear socks today.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. Well, let's chat about your business first to kind of get into what you do, and then we'll chat about how you kind of got to where you are today, really, and how you kind of navigated that journey as well. So your firm is called Fratzke Consulting, and you've been around for a number of years. And you guys, the two of you plus, I know your twin brother Ryan also helps to run the business with you as well, James. So tell us about kind of where things are today and what you're seeing in the marketing world, since you focus on marketing strategy and brand strategy and digital communications as well. Tell us about what you're seeing in the marketplace today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Fratzke Consulting's been around for 6 years now. We're celebrating our 6-year anniversary in May. So if you're listening to this when we recorded it, we're celebrating that now. And we've gone through a lot in the last 6 years. There was a global pandemic. We're facing a potential looming recession. There's a change in consumer behavior and how people are shopping. More people are shopping online than ever before. And so those are some of the things that we're really seeing out in the marketplace is an acceleration of this digital first mindset based off of people kind of being at home more during the pandemic. And those folks that were a little bit more apprehensive to shopping on their mobile phone or trying out some of these different things, they kind of were forced into that position. And so what we're doing a lot with brands right now is helping them with that digital transformation of their marketing departments, communications. And then where branding kind of fits into that is we kind of think about it in this three-folded approach where branding is what separates you from your competitors. Marketing is how you communicate to your external audience, and communications, which is Lisa's expertise, is how you communicate to the internal audience. And so we're seeing a real demand with brands right now to get all three of those things in sync. Because if you're kind of positioning yourself one way externally, but internally your team members and folks are saying, well, that kind of rings hollow. That doesn't, the way we're positioning ourselves externally doesn't really match how we're carrying out, our strategies and things internally. Or kind of more consumers are basing their purchasing decisions on purpose and alignment with brands. And so again, if you're out of alignment with your brand strategy and how you're marketing yourself, that can be a disconnect too. So we're seeing a lot of brands really wanting to get those three areas tightened up, making sure they're all rowing in the same direction. And then the pandemic piece has really accelerated the need for digital. So I think those are some of the most interesting things that we're seeing over the last 6 years.
And I'll add to that from a internal communications and culture perspective. The pandemic really accelerated what I like to call the workforce revolution, where, expectations have really evolved in terms of what employees are looking for, what they want from the brands that they're working for. We had the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle, and now our labor market is starting to even out and become stable. But I think what employees are looking for from brands in terms of a healthy culture, purpose-driven work, and more flexibility are still very relevant. And so we're really working with brands in terms of helping them develop their employer value proposition, which is why someone would want to work for them as a company, and the why behind the employees that are working there, and just doing a lot of work around the EVP and also helping them drive employee engagement.
That's great. And that's one of the things I think I really kind of caught my eye when we first connected at that networking event for family businesses up in Orange County a few months ago. But the fact that you talk about not only just in our actual conversation one-on-one, but also on your website, you talk about that communications piece. Right? I think a lot of branding and digital marketing firms that I come across talk about it in a very tactical way, and a very kind of a, this is what it is, and just get this message straight. They don't talk about the actual delivery of that message and the communications piece, both externally to their customer base, but also internally. And making sure that alignment is there as well it's much easier said than done today because of social media, and anybody can say anything at any time about whatever they want, right? But I think that's one of the things that really kind of stood out for me about how you position yourselves in the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. We do think it's a unique value proposition because there is a real need to get in alignment both externally and internally. And that does seem to be a missing piece, especially as, again, you have phenomenons that you're well aware of, like quiet quitting and different things like that, right? Well, a lot of times that's because the corporate strategy and then the EVP, that value proposition, are out of alignment. And so folks are like not connected to the purpose, they're not connected to the work. And so it's easier for them just to quiet quit than it is to engage in a meaningful way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, I think a great example, there's a lot of examples out there right now, but it just so happens that one of the biggest examples in the public eye right now is Disney, right? Obviously. Mm-hmm. And you both worked for Disney. So, that must be interesting for you to kind of see what's happening now, how it's playing out with a changeover and obviously leadership with Iger coming back, but also just, the employee, base, their focus, their desire for that transparency, and for Disney to really kind of live their brand, not say one thing and do something else. And this, this could be said for, dozens of companies out there, but Disney is kind of front and center right now. I'm curious about your thoughts around what you're seeing with the organization and their recent decisions.
Well, I think we have lots of thoughts about that.
Yes, I'm sure you do. Right.
Yes. Well, I think going back to, I think some of the situation you're referring to in terms of legislation in Florida.
Right, in Florida. Right.
That some people dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill. The other side of it, I think, is the parents. I don't know the exact official name for it, but the nickname of it is the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida that Disney had originally not taken a stand on.
Right.
And because of pushback from their employees, they decided to come out and say, hey, we're not for this legislation, and here's why. And I think it was really important for Disney to speak out about it, because they recently, I think within the past year or 2 years, they have 4 keys that they have historically focused on with their cast members that are important. And those are safety, courtesy, show, and efficiency. And they added diversity as one of those keys. And so
I didn't realize that. Interesting. Okay.
Yes, which was diversity within the past couple of years. And so that's a key area of focus for them. And so when you work for the company and you hear internally that that's a really important focus, and that internal focus is not reflected externally in how you're reacting to the changing landscape politically or otherwise, I think a lot of people who worked for the company felt like there was a disconnect in messaging and who the company was, and they spoke out. So I think that they should have spoken out. How they spoke out and when they chose to, and the dynamics of that probably did not work, obviously did not work in their favor. And so now they're in this kind of war with DeSantis in terms of the political dynamics of Florida. So I think that they are a good representative of a lot of the situations many of the brands are facing today, in terms of a lot of brands are facing this existential crisis of who are we and how are we going to communicate that to our consumers, and how are we going to communicate that to our employees, and are we willing to risk upsetting one of those groups based on what we've decided the answer to that question is. And I think that my recommendation most of the time is that you should know who you are as a brand and be willing to upset a group if that is the case, because that's how people know that they want to buy from you or they want to work from you. And if you're not clear about that and it's fuzzy, that's where you start to get a lack of employee engagement. That's where consumers, don't see that you're a purpose-driven brand. So I think that Disney is a great example of what a lot of brands are going through. They've unfortunately have a really high profile, so they are getting it, they're getting hit really hard. But
sure.
I think that they did make the right decision in speaking out. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I almost wondered too if they were a little bit more decisive about it up front, right? Because there was a bit of a waffling that happened with the then CEO Bob Chapek of, well, we're not going to say something, well, we are going to say something. And I think if they just kind of made a decision and ran with it, they kind of showed a little bit of a weakness in waffling back and forth. And I think that's where then you started to see that culture war start to accelerate. It's really gotten to a quite interesting point now. I feel like
it has. I agree. Yeah. No matter which side of the political spectrum you happen to be on, just from a pure branding and corporate responsibility and employee communication and outreach and outrage in some cases, just from that by itself, it's a fascinating case study.
Oh, 100%. And so, you've got some of the most recent news where they were planning on building a new campus in the Orlando area and moving a bunch of Imagineers there and all those different things. And they just recently announced like, hey, we're canceling that project. And it's interesting to see then how both sides will position that. The people that support Disney will say, well, that was one of the political chips that they had, right? And they've got a lot more. They've been kind of waving this $17 billion investment out there. It's like, okay, well, do you want us to invest $17 billion in Florida or not? And so I think this is the first domino. It'll be interesting to see. And then the other side of the argument is, well, with all of the, they say go woke, go broke, all these things that Disney's doing and the wokeism. Well, their business isn't doing really well and they can't afford to build that campus anymore, and so it's more of a business decision. So it's interesting to see how it plays out. But I agree with what Lisa said as far as, brands need to know what those boundaries are. They need to know if they're going to walk the walk, how they expect them to, or if they're going to talk the talk rather, how do they expect to then walk the walk? And that does have implications on your business, on your ability to retain employees, and a long laundry list of other things as well.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And I think, again, regardless of the political ideation for either side, we always talk to companies about, you have two different brands, right? You have your brand in terms of your products, whatever you're selling, product or service, right? And that's one piece. But a lot of companies forget about their employment brand. And, on the recruiting side, obviously that's front and center and always in the spotlight for me. But regardless, your consumers could also be employees and vice versa. And I think a lot of companies, especially the mid-sized companies that we tend to work with, many of them don't really have a good grasp of, okay, what is our employment brand? How do people, perceive us in the marketplace? Are we a place that people want to come work for, or do people think that we're working 70 hours a week, right? And neither one is necessarily right or wrong, but whatever that is, you've got to, first of all, you got to be aware of it and embrace it. And then you've got to hire and kind of motivate and engage your employee base according to that. If you're Disney and you're adding a fifth key, I'm sure that was no, quick overnight decision to add a fifth key to those first four. And this diversity, you better be damn sure that you're going to be, like you said, walking that walk, and diversity is really being played out as your employment brand, where you're going against everything that you say you stand for.
Absolutely, 100%. So it's interesting to see how that will end up playing out long term, but in the short term, it's definitely an interesting case study to dive into.
Yeah. So I'm curious, and along those lines, from the communication standpoint, are you seeing other clients that are either trying to figure out what their brand is or are trying to reinvent it? And how is that going from a communications perspective?
Yeah, I think there are a lot, especially to your point, in the mid-sized business who maybe hadn't put their resources or time or energy toward figuring out what's our employer brand, what do we want to say about it externally? Because the reality is, if you're not proactively communicating your employer brand, you're passively communicating an employer brand. And that's what employees are saying about you, what they're writing in their reviews. So yeah, we are seeing a lot of businesses try to understand what their employer brand is. And a lot of it was because of the tight labor market and wanting to attract and retain top talent. So yes, there's a huge driver in that area. And I think what's interesting is historically, when we thought of employer brand, I think we often thought about benefits and pay and the culture, just the different aspects, flexibility. But now I think employer brand has enhanced, where we're working with a lot of clients to incorporate purpose into their employer brand. So what's their purpose and how are employees going to plug into that purpose in a meaningful way? Because 2 out of 3, or it's 80%, I think, of millennials are looking to work for brands that are purpose driven. And so incorporating purpose into the employer brand has become a really big key, in addition to incorporating core values and, the type of experience you're going to find when working someplace. So I think back to brands kind of having that existential crisis. They don't want to just communicate about flexibility and benefits and salary. They also want to incorporate, this is who we are. This is our purpose. These are our core values. And if these sync up with who you are, you're going to be a great fit here. And that's been our focus when we've been working with clients.
And now a short word from our sponsor. I know you're here to listen to the interview, so I'll make this short and sweet. After 26 years in the recruiting industry, I've learned one very important lesson. Business is all about people. Without the right people in the right positions, it's going to be an uphill battle. And it isn't always easy to find the right people either, especially in this market. So I invite you to contact us to support you in building, training, and retaining your cutting-edge team. Turning Point Executive Search, connecting people, inspiring performance. You're like me. You're a small business, right? I have my sister as part of my business. Obviously, the two of you are married and you're running the company. Plus, you have your twin brother as well. So the three of you are involved. And that, I know for me, I didn't start off the company thinking I want us to be all about a family-run business and that's how we're going to portray ourselves to the marketplace. But it's ended up being a little bit of that, right? Where, the family atmosphere, the family culture, the close-knit, communication and transparency that we have as a team, our 7-person team, is really important. And so we share that and use it as kind of a differentiator with prospective clients also. Is that how it is for you as well? Are you working with a lot of other family-run businesses? And if so, how do you kind of utilize that experience that you have with your own business?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do work with a number of family-owned businesses, and we also work with, more corporate, mid-sized businesses out in the marketplace. But I think with the way that we use it internally with, the fact that we're a small business, we're family-owned and we're battle-tested. And we tell that to prospective clients, right? And they appreciate that aspect that we're a boutique firm. They're going to interact with the partners on a regular basis. And so that for us is a differentiator as well. And I think then one of the interesting things about it is that they know, because we're family owned, that there is going to be a kind of a consistent hand on how that relationship is managed long term, right? You're not going to get passed from one person to the next person, and next week you've got a new account manager or something along those lines. There's something about being a family business that certainly projects longevity, stability, and I think that that's definitely been a kind of a value proposition for us over the last 6 years. And especially working with other than family-owned businesses, you can speak that language a little bit more clearly. As part of the some of the family-owned business work that we do, we're part of the Family-Owned Business Center at Cal State Fullerton. And I tell you, it's so interesting, the conversations and the problems that group is trying to solve, all the way from how do we make the business profitable? How do we make it more efficient? To how do we handle succession planning? How do we handle bringing our children or their spouses or other relatives into the business in a meaningful way? And so it's really interesting to kind of see some of the problems that those types of businesses are dealing with, and then also working with our mid-sized businesses. What we've actually determined is it's interesting. I come from a background of working with really big firms. Lisa comes from a background 10 plus years in communications, corporate communications at Disney. You get these big companies and you feel like their problems are unique, right? Because they're so big. And the reality is that we've worked with small businesses, we've worked with medium businesses, we've worked with large businesses, we've worked with family-owned businesses. There's a core piece that's similar about all of them, is that there's humans at the center of all of it, right? And so a lot of the problems that they're having are the same, just at a different size and scale, which we've always found that to be really interesting. But the family business piece is really unique because you're dealing with dynamics. If I give Lisa feedback, it's different than if I gave an employee feedback, because she cares more about what I think and vice versa, right? So
sure, yeah, it holds more weight.
Dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, then you have to go home and decide who's going to make dinner. And so if someone's feedback is not taken very well, then you're probably the one making dinner.
Yeah. Well, it's a collaborative process here, Ken. We actually enjoy making dinner together. So it's not a problem.
Yeah. I keep joking that my wife and I have been married for 31 years, and she's a marriage and family therapist. And so I say, I'm basically her main client, right? She's got a lot of other clients, but I'm her main client. So it's a good dynamic. Yeah. It makes it fun.
Love that.
Well, I do want to say for family businesses, and there was a survey done by Edelman in terms of institutional trust. And out of all the different types of businesses between like public and private and large corporations, family businesses are actually the most trusted in terms of stakeholders. And so I think that is one of those things that as a family business, you have some unique dynamics you need to navigate, like the being married and sorting through some of those communication issues. But also it can be your competitive edge with stakeholders if you leverage the fact that you're a family in your storytelling and your branding, but also as a strength within your brand and your company. And when we think about communications, we see there being 3 layers: interpersonal communication, which is communication between like employees and leader to employee; business communications, which includes anything that employees need to know in order to do their job; and then culture building communications. But when you think about family businesses, they really need to hone in on the interpersonal communication and get that down very well, because any interpersonal dynamics between a family that are not going well is going to be felt throughout the organization and be reflected in the employee experience or the day-to-day for employees. So that's when we work with family businesses, we focus on all 3 layers, but we really want to zero in on the interpersonal and make sure that there's healthy communication taking place. Because if it isn't, it can really go awry.
That's a really good point. Yeah, it is very much amplified when you've got that family dynamic, husband and wife, or any kind of family dynamic in there. It just changes things dramatically. So to that point, how do the 3 of you decide who's in charge of what? So in terms of decisions, some being more strategic, some being more tactical. How do you maintain that balance?
Well, it all starts with a very competitive game of rock, paper, scissors. And then from there, that's a joke. Lisa's going to
I love that.
Up later for making that a joke.
That's great. Hey, whatever it takes. If it works, great.
Yeah, I was going to say, I like that idea.
Yeah, maybe we should implement that. I think for us, it became very clear, like 5 years ago, as we started getting into the business, that we needed to kind of split decision making up by practice and our expertise. And so that's what we've done. We've kind of built these mini businesses or practices, as we call them, within the Fratzke consulting business. So we've got brand strategy, which Ryan heads up. We've got the digital marketing, which I head up, and then we've got the communication culture, which Lisa heads up. And so as a executive team, we're constantly meeting, putting together what we call our OKRs, objectives and key results, where we're kind of deciding, okay, these are the big things that we're trying to accomplish as a company. But then as individual practice owners, we then can take those OKRs and come up with our own and say, okay, how do we want to reach those goals? And so within each practice, we're able to make kind of decisions that best serve the success of that practice, so as long as they kind of fit into the overall strategic vision that we've developed. So that's been really helpful. It's kind of a very clearly drawing the lines. And so if I have team members working directly within a project that I'm heading, I'm going to be the person that's making all the final decisions on those. If Lisa is heading up a project, she's going to be the one that makes the final decisions on those items. And of course, we value each other's perspective and opinion and advice and feedback, but we really have had to lean into the fact of, hey, you're the accountable person on this project. You're going to be the one that gets to make the final decision. And so that's been helpful for our dynamic, the three of us, who are all very creative, very assertive, have very strong opinions. And so it's kind of knowing, like, when are you in a supporting role? And then when are you the one making the final decision on something?
I have that same dynamic with my wife, actually. Because I normally go into, problem solving mode. She'll bring something up and I'll have to stop myself and say, hun, do you want me to help, figure out a solution here, some ideas, or do you want to kind of just talk through it? Because if I don't ask that question, I will assume the wrong thing, honestly. And back to your point, you got to set up that dynamic or that expectation at the outset of any conversation or any kind of decision that's going to be made. Otherwise, you might go down the wrong path and someone's going to get their feathers ruffled, or you're going to be very unproductive at the same time. Now, so speaking of being entrepreneurs and having your own business, did you both grow up either aspiring to be business owners, or did you think that you would? I know, Lisa, you grew up with parents that were teachers, right? So I'm curious, now that you find yourself running a business, how was that journey?
Yeah, I grew with having my parents as teachers. I just couldn't be more thankful for that, because both of my parents have a teaching mindset, which they took with us as kids. And they both have always seen like the best in people. They see every person has hidden potential. They've taught me how to communicate with people in a way where that communication is going to be received and acted upon, or in a way that's inspiring and really connects with people. And so I think that having, my parents as teachers inspired me in terms of just how I value and how I connect and how I communicate with people. And it taught me the value of communications. And then my dad was always kind of, I think, a frustrated entrepreneur. So when I was growing up, we would come up with all these ideas for like businesses that we would write down, or we wanted to have a bumper sticker business, and we would write down all these clever like bumper sticker slogans. And when I was doing screenwriting, he would give me all these ideas for screenwriting scripts. And now that we're in business, he has ideas for our business. Like, he's an idea man. And I think he would have been an amazing entrepreneur if he took the leap. He started out as a teacher, and then he got his MBA. And then he went into helping businesses with their finances through being a controller. But then my mom, her specifically, she was a gifted teacher. And yeah, I just think she really communicated to me the importance of seeing the potential in others and assuming the best, and how to communicate in ways that people will receive. Even difficult personalities or difficult students, she never underestimated them or disregarded them. And so I think in terms of my career trajectory, I started out pursuing screenwriting, and then I got into Disney, and then now became an entrepreneur. I think I was always drawn toward the creative field, and the act of being a creative is very similar to, you need the same amount of courage in being a creative as you need to in being an entrepreneur. And so I think I've been always drawn to a career that allows me to take risks. And so although I didn't initially have in my mind like, oh, I am going to be an entrepreneur or business owner, I knew I wanted to pursue a career that invited me to take risks on a regular basis and create something out of nothing. And those two ideas are very much in line. So when the time came to leave Disney and I was given the opportunity to join with James and Ryan in this business together, it seemed like the right decision. So that's kind of how I got there, is this very supportive parents, this being drawn to creativity and then wanting to take that leap.
And what an incredible leap it was.
It was.
I remember telling her parents, because we have a very close relationship with her parents, and we really do see them as mentors. And so I remember telling them that you were going to leave Disney and join the business. And they were very supportive, but they were always very, they liked that safety of being at a big company.
Yeah.
Sure. So it's really fun to kind of go on that journey with them. But I don't know, for Ryan and I, we were always entrepreneurial, kind of driven by, what type of businesses that we could start and different things like that. And we were always very encouraged by our parents. Just kind of, if you go way back a little bit, my dad and his twin brother started a landscape business when they were in their teens, and they worked really hard. They had a lot of hard work ethic, and they were able to, over the course of several years, by the time they got to 21, buy their first house based off of the income that they generated from that landscaping business. And so they continued to run that and grow that through our childhood. And so we got to kind of see that hard work ethic firsthand, being an owner operator who's also not afraid to roll up his sleeves and get into the nitty gritty of the work and to help lift and move and do all those things that come with hard labor of landscaping. And then my mom was always more of kind of the big picture, big idea type of entrepreneur. And so she always had these great business ideas, and she was always willing to take the leap and try to make them happen. And one of the stories that I really love is she started a business called Made by You in her local community that she grew up in Whittier, which is kind of an underserved community. And the whole idea with Made by You was it could be a place where families and kids could come and do crafts together, things that were made by you. And so it was always really fun watching her go through the process of developing a new business, because you got to be part of kind of the business plan. You got to be part of the build out of the store. Think about how she's thinking about buying merchandise and how to position certain things. And she was always kind of the one that encouraged my brother and I, my twin brother, to be the candy kingpins at school, selling candy, which you're not supposed to. So your mother and father would not have loved me as a child, because,
They've seen your hidden potential.
Yeah. But like all of those type of things that, when I talk to entrepreneurs, it seems like so many of them sold candy in school or, did lawn mowing or whatever. They found those opportunities to kind of turn something into a business. And so Ryan and I continued to kind of do that. In our teens, we started a graphic design business where, we were turning people's photographs into kind of pop art, Andy Warhol style, things that they could hang on their wall art. We kind of went through the process, and my mom and dad really helped us get a kiosk in the mall during the holiday season because, we wanted to be in there for Black Friday and, all these things. It's so interesting, Ken, because, again, we were probably 16, 17 when we were doing that. And it's so bizarre because people will come up to you and be like, oh, I can do that on my phone. Oh, I can do that. And it's so interesting as a business owner, the amount of negativity that sometimes you receive from people that you're like, why are you sharing this with me? Like, you don't have to share that with me.
Yeah, it takes more energy to be that negative than to just walk on by and say nothing.
I know, not say anything, And they didn't know that the kid standing there selling it is also the one that invested all their money and doing it,
Yeah.
And then one of our favorites was we did a kind of a fence staining business because we grew up kind of in Temecula, Marietta, a lot of new homes being built, and a lot of their fences were untreated. So after 5 years, they started looking bad and getting rotten. So we kind of said, hey, what if we went door to door selling this fence staining? You just bought a new house. It's an investment. You want your fence to last. And that was a very, very, very hot summer where we did that. So we didn't do it very long. We went through the summer, we made some good money that helped kind of catapult us. But yeah, so we've had a long history of doing those types of things. It's really because of the hard work ethic of my dad and kind of the big ideas of my mom. Ryan and I kind of have taken both of those things and brought it into our life and our business as well.
That's perfect. Well, you pretty much just described the reason why I chose The Practical Optimist as the title for my podcast and my book. Same kind of thing, taking the traits from my mom and my dad. And my mom was more kind of that really, really, really strong, intense work ethic, very intelligent, very brilliant woman, a little more of a linear thinker, not risk avoidant, but a little bit less risk tolerant. And my dad was the optimist, right? My mom practical, my dad the optimist. He was the visionary, the idea guy, say yes and figure out how to do it later on, right? And so the blend of those two traits also is kind of what made me who I am as, not only as a leader professionally, but also as a father, as a son, as a husband as well. It's just that blending. Hey, all, if you like what you're hearing in today's conversation, we'd love it if you could support us by following the podcast and giving us a 5-star rating. This will give a lot more people a chance to hear our guests as they share their insights. How would you describe yourself? So again, I use The Practical Optimist for myself. James, do you want to start? What words do you use to describe yourself?
Yeah, that's for me. It's more of a mantra, and it's positive movement forward. I'm all about just making positive movement forward each day. It could be little things, just paying a bill or knocking off a project that I've been thinking about for a while. But it's always about just kind of taking that next step and feeling like you made some sort of progress. And then I think from a work standpoint, I would describe it as relentless consistency. I just try to be relentlessly consistent in one direction. I think in today's culture, especially in our generation, there's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of people telling you need to do lots of different things all at once to be successful. And if I have to be relentlessly consistent and just try to block out the noise and stay focused on the things we're trying to accomplish at Fratzke Consulting, the things we're trying to accomplish in our family life, and kind of just block out the rest of the noise from there.
Lisa, how about yourself?
Yes, I also have two. But the first one I think that really guides me in our work and as a person is I'm very much what I'll call a gritty idealist. And I say the word gritty, it's inspired by the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, which is that grit requires passion and perseverance. So I really do see the best in people and I see opportunity and I see how we can have a better world. I see how companies can provide a better employment experience, but it's going to take a lot of passion and perseverance to get there. And I enjoy personally putting in that work, but also inspiring other people to put in that work. So it's a very grounded idealism. And then the second piece is more of a mantra similar to James's, which is to pursue your greatest joy always. And this is inspired by an experience I had about 10 years ago where I went on a hike to a swimming hole called Aztec Falls. And this, I was very much used to taking emotional or mental or spiritual risks, but not very many physical risks, like jumping off a 20-foot high cliff, into water. And so, everyone got in line to jump off and I got there, I took the leap and jumped off and I saw everyone pop up from the water after feeling very exhilarated and excited they had done it. And then I popped up out of the water and I was like, that was horrible. I'm still terrified. I can't believe I did that. Why don't I feel good? I thought you were supposed to like take a risk and then feel really great about it. You know, I'm alive, you know, like, why do I feel so bad? And it really like disturbed me. And I was like, I need to figure out how to jump off this cliff and feel joyful about it. And so I got back on the cliff and like, I did it again and I jumped off and I still felt awful. And I still felt filled with fear after I'd made it into the water. And then I stood there for another 10 minutes and I asked people as they were jumping, are you enjoying this? Why are you enjoying this? What about it is enjoyable to you?
Right.
What am I doing wrong that this is not a enjoyable experience? And so I finally came to, I watched people as they were jumping off, and there was like this excitement, and like there was this glean in their eye, like they were really excited to do it. And I wasn't excited. I was just too scared when I was doing it. I wasn't able to feel the excitement. And so I decided that in order for me to enjoy it, I needed to figure out why I was doing it. And I was doing it to like choose adventure, and this was the kind of life I wanted to have, was an adventure, a life that was adventurous. And so then I like got up there and I went to jump off, and I yelled at the top of my lungs, and I filled myself with excitement about it. And then I landed in the water, and I felt great about it. And so to me, that kind of opened my eyes to like, I think often when we do things, we need to understand the deeper why of why we are doing them to truly enjoy them. And so that's why it's pursue your greatest joy. It's like, find the joy in what you're doing. You're going to be able to find it. And it may not be super apparent at first, but it's there, and it may take a few tries. But you'll find why something can bring you joy. And that, story really inspired me. So that's another one of my mantras.
I love that. Wow. I think, talk about the intensity of your self-awareness, especially in that moment, right? Where you're literally jumping off a cliff, you're in the water, then you climb back up, do it again. I mean, to have the wherewithal to even think about, why am I not enjoying this the way I should be and the way everybody else is? That's that's very telling. It's also very inspirational to keep trying it. Yeah.
Self-awareness, Ken, is one of Lisa and I's strongest qualities as a couple, I feel like. Like one of the things that we did when we were dating was, because we both love to read, we got each other our favorite books, and like books that were really influential to us, that helped kind of program how we think today and how we see the world. And we exchanged those books, and we're like, okay, you read this and I'll read that, and we'll get some insight into to who we are and how we think. And so my book I gave to her was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is probably one of the most romantic books you could hand over to.
Definitely in the romantic section of the bookstore.
Yeah, it's right there at Barnes & Noble. You'll find it in the romantic section. It's a classic, Stephen Covey. I really love it. I've read it several times, but that gives you some insight into how I think. I'm very process driven. I'm kind of straddle the macro and the micro, and I like to think that way, and so I think it provided some insight. And Lisa, you gave me.
Yes, I gave him my favorite book, which continues to be my favorite book, which is Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. Sure. I was very inspired by her. This was, I guess, when we started dating 6 or so years ago. And I still am very inspired by her. And it gave us a lot of language for how we communicate with each other. I think one of the things she says in the book is we often tell ourselves stories that aren't true. And it's helpful to say the story I'm telling myself is this when you're talking to your partner or to someone. And they can say, that's not what I meant by that, or that's not what I intended, or that's not true. Like, I was thinking this. And it helps them not be as defensive because you're couching it in your experience of what they're saying. So it gave us a lot of tools, I think, to read.
And gave us some self-awareness.
Gave us a lot of self-awareness
of how we think, and it's been a great kind of building block for our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Not having heard the story yet, we're going to in a second here, but not having heard it yet, but just having heard you talk for the last number of minutes here, I would guess that you guys met in some like safari someplace, or some, like adventurous thing where it was a team building, where you're having to lean back and someone catches you that you've never met before, something like that, where it's that kind of a fun risk kind of environment. But how did you guys meet?
Yeah, you know what? I like that.
I know.
I like that.
I mean, all this talk about like risk and self-awareness and being so so caught up in all that. It's very exhilarating to hear it.
Yes, it is. Well, I will tell you this. We love to travel, so we do all those fun, exciting things that you just mentioned. But it was actually a little bit more simpler than that.
Yeah.
There's a coffee shop. Ironically, that's just a block up from where our office is now in downtown Fullerton, called Drip Coffee. And it was a weekend. It was a Saturday. And, on Saturdays, Lisa liked to go to coffee shops to work on some of her creative projects. And so did I. And so Lisa was already there at Drip. I had come in to drip, set up my computer at a bar area that I don't really like to sit at. It's not very comfortable. One of my favorite seats was a couch, and there's these 2 couches that are right across from each other, but that was already taken. So I had to settle on this bar. And so as I'm working, I see that the couch seat opens up. So I said, okay, let me go sit down in my favorite spot. Well, there's another couch across from it. So as I go to sit down, there's this young lady sitting on the couch working on her laptop, and she kind of looks up at me, and I look down at her, and we make eye contact. And I said to her, "You look familiar."
And I said, "You look familiar." And that's because we did look familiar, because we had both worked at Disney, but we hadn't really met one-on-one. I think we had seen each other around.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But we hadn't met at Disney. We'd just seen each other. And so like we went through the list of how do we know each other? Is it college? No.
Mm-hmm.
Is it this? No. Is it Disney? Yes. And that's how we knew each other.
Yeah. But when I tell people that story, they're like, wow, what a great pickup line. You know,
I was going to say, right.
Familiar, you know, and it was a great pickup line because it's got 100% success rate. I said it to one person, now
Exactly.
she's my wife. So, you know, for any single people out there listening, but no, it was true. She did look familiar, but of course then sparks started to fly. And what was really interesting is I was getting ready to go on a writing retreat because we both like to write. And I had a friend that lived in Montana and they were getting ready to go on vacation. So I said, hey, let me come watch your house and I'll look at the beautiful mountains and snow and write for a week. And, when I asked her what she was doing, she was working on some writing as well. So then I'm like, okay, well, she's going to eat this up. I had a schedule that I had in my bag that was color coordinated. This was my dedicated writing time. This was my relaxation time. So I got on one knee and I'm like, and wasn't the first time I got on one knee. But you know, and I'm like,
first time.
Well, it was the first time, but it wasn't the last, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what I want to say. Yeah. And I was showing her, she was like eating it up. So I was like, okay, I think this woman and I might have a lot in common. And so we exchanged.
That didn't scare her off, seeing all your color coding and like planning all that stuff out. Yeah, it's all or nothing. Either it's like I'm out of here, or oh, this is great. This is what I want in a partner.
Yeah. Well, he had even scheduled like downtime. I was like, well, what's happening in that time? Well, I might have a glass of wine and go in the sauna or whatever it was.
I go to these random coffee shops and see if my line actually works on somebody.
Yeah.
But what was really funny was the Disney connection. So I found out, because, you know, when you meet somebody, then you're like looking up, what does their Instagram look like? You know, what does their LinkedIn look like? Lisa and I had been connected on LinkedIn for 3 years, and I had endorsed her like 3 times. So I didn't know her
groundwork in stealth mode. I love it.
So
that's awesome. I love that. Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, obviously our listeners can't see this, but just the dynamic of watching you two of you, you know, interact and communicate over the last 40 minutes or so, it's pretty obvious that that's a very strong partnership and relationship and very supportive. I'm sure it's that way in the business as well. I'm curious, do you end up providing any, not you know, marital, you know, advice, but do you end up going kind of beyond the professional with some of your clients where they are in need of some clarity around communication, or they need somebody who's totally objective on the outside to kind of say, hey, you know what, I noticed this is going to be, if we're going to work together as a you know, client and partner, it's going to be difficult if this keeps happening. So do you wind up getting into those situations where you give, maybe not expectedly, but you give some of that feedback on those pieces? Yeah.
You know what, again, it's so funny that you asked that, because with our family-owned business clients, we interact with all types of dynamics, fathers, sons, husbands, wives, so on and so forth. But we had one client that owner operator, medium-sized business here in SoCal, and his wife was in marketing and had done marketing work before. And we had come in and done our digital marketing audit, started to set up the digital strategy. And we were talking about how to build out their digital team. And for the longest time, this owner operator would be like, well, you know, my wife, but I'm not sure if I want to bring her into the business, and so on and so forth. And so actually did end up doing a lot of consulting around, hey, like, you know, absolutely, let's interview her. Let's go through that process. You know, I work with my wife. I really enjoy it, but you got to, you know, have good communication. It was interesting to see that play out because he was really apprehensive about mixing the personal and the business aspect, but he knew his wife had a lot to offer with her experience, but he wanted to protect the integrity of their marriage and not blur the lines too much. And so it was really interesting to be able to kind of consult through that. And ultimately, we decided to hire her, and she's been working in the business for the last 4 years and has really added a lot to it. And so it's really interesting to see their dynamic working together. And so, it's been cool to see that kind of play out. So yeah, we have participated in that, very specifically.
Yes.
But yeah.
But even in terms of EQ, and how important it is to have that emotional intelligence as a leader talking to your team, we will often consult with our clients on those dynamics. And if they're going to have a one-on-one conversation, that's a difficult conversation with a team member, or they're going to roll out a new program, like what is the best way to do that? What's the most thoughtful way to communicate? And I do think that our interest in emotional intelligence and our own reading in it, and then our own personal experience and working together, like we say, we've gone through like 5 to 10 years of communication issues as a couple within the first couple years because we had to, has really helped make that one of our superpowers when working with clients. And it's something we really enjoy doing.
That's great. I love that. As great stories. I think it really, it speaks very well to, what it takes to run a successful business, and equally what it takes to be in a successful marriage. I mean, it's, you can't separate the two. The dynamic is quite similar in a lot of ways, for sure. I love that.
It really is. You got to have boundaries though, Ken, like knowing like, okay, this is when we don't talk about work.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Or, trying to respect our weekends and different things like that. And so we have identified like there's times and places that, hey, that just doesn't work for us to communicate. Driving home from work to home, we typically try not to talk about work. That's like our wind down time.
Right. Yeah. Kind of decompress and
Yes.
Yeah. And we'll always go on a walk every night, and maybe we'll limit ourselves to 1 or 2 work related topics. And then we kind of have to stop ourselves and be like, okay, hey, I think that's enough for tonight. Right.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of push up against those boundaries to kind of understand.
You have to cross the boundary to know they're a boundary.
That's the line. Let's not cross it. Right?
Yeah,
exactly. So. Well, I know, like for me as well. I mean, my wife has her own, private practice for her therapy work she does, but it's just her, right? And so there are some days where at the end of the day, and she'll say, "How was your day?" And I'll say, "I'll tell you in 6 months," right? Because I'm doing so much business development. I don't know if what I did today is going to have any actual results until 6 months from now. So that's one response. But beyond that, there are times where it's been a really, challenging day, or a lot of things are going on, a lot of moving parts. And I'll say, I've got a little bit of decision fatigue. Let's talk about something else. Let's, whatever it might be, or can you decide on what we're going to do tonight for dinner or whatever it might be? Because there's a lot of that decision that goes on just nonstop all day long when you're a business owner, and you can't get away from it. And, I can't say that I don't enjoy it. I do like having an impact on the business from that position, but it can get exhausting. It can get very tiring if you're not careful. So I do a lot of journaling as well. I don't read as much as the two of you do, but I also have my shows that I watch that are great outlets that we watch together, walking at the beach, that kind of thing. So yeah, you do have to have those boundaries, and you have to communicate about that. What do I need right now? What am I able to give? What am I not able to give? Check back with me in 2 hours, whatever it might be,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, give me that kind of percentage of like what energy stores you have left. And like, I love the way you describe that. Like, hey, I don't have it right now. I need you to pick up the extra 50% that I'm not able to give. And so when you have a strong partnership, they'll step up into that spot and fill that gap. And that's a really beautiful thing.
I agree. Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say, what can be hard for us sometimes is we might have the same experience on that day. Maybe we've shared a client, and we were on that client call, or we're on a similar project together. And so we might both be at 10% or 20. And then that's where we have had to learn to say, I'm low, you're low, we're ordering dinner.
Exactly right. Yeah. And that's okay. Right.
That's okay. Yep. So yes. Yeah.
I love that. No, that's perfect. So I really think that, as I'm sure our listeners have figured out very quickly here, your approach to how you manage things, communication, I'm sure spills over, in spades to your clients as well. I think is a fantastic differentiator and a great way for clients to really get more value out of you than they might get from another, traditional, stereotypical branding company, right? Which is going to be very tactical and not much else. So as people want to get a hold of you, if they want to learn more about what you do at Fratzke and just talk to you about their own branding and communications issues, what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you, aside from showing up at Drip Coffee and talking to you on that couch? But beyond that, how can people get a hold of you and learn more?
Yeah, that always works, bumping into us at a coffee shop. But if you want to go more traditional route, go to our website, fratzkeconsulting.com. We've got a lot of on-ramps for getting connected with us there. We've got a lot of free resources, webinars, research, insights that can be really helpful. And then, don't be afraid to give us a call or fill out one of our contact forms. And then from a social media perspective, we're very active on LinkedIn. So you can find our company page at Fratzke Consulting as well. Or, feel free to connect with Lisa and I at James Fratzke or Lisa Fratzke on LinkedIn. We're very engaged there, and we're always sharing content. We're sharing perspective. We're weighing in on some of the top issues of our time. So those are some of the best ways to get connected with us.
Perfect. Well, I'm sure you'll probably be hearing from some of our audience out there for sure after this great conversation. Thank you both so much for just your willingness to chat and carve time out of your day, but also just being vulnerable and having a very frank, open, honest conversation. That's what makes this podcast so fun, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, this was awesome.
It's the first time doing it together. We've never done a podcast together. So thank you, Ken, for providing this opportunity to us.
That was it. You guys are a great tag team. So I would highly recommend it in the future for you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Good talking to you.
All right. You too.
You too. Bye.